Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rachel and this is Constellation Library. So, it has been a while since we have seen each other. I have been going through it. I've had a lot going on in my life, a lot of stressors, so I've not made book-to-book priority, which unfortunately is my cycle. I tend to really put a lot of effort into it and do a lot of reading and get a lot of videos made. A lot is relative. I mean, I don't film as much as everyone else seems to, but then I have whatever happens in my life and I end up not being available to do that. It does take a backseat to other things in my life, so I do want to apologize to anyone who has been waiting for wrap-ups from the previous months or who is interested in the March TBR. These things are coming. Today in this video I'm going to do our wrap-up for the year so far, January and February. And then there will be a video coming, I'm not sure which will come out first, but my TBR for March, which I am reading. I have been reading the whole time. I just have not been filming. So I do have some stuff for you, so don't worry. It's not like 2 books and then we're done. I do have some stuff for you. So I have on my laptop here all of the things that I have written. I've got my Compile spreadsheet open. This is the first year that I'm using Compile, so I will kind of let you all know how I felt about each of the categories and then give you my overall rating on the book. So we're just going to jump right in because this may be a longer video, so you might want to go ahead and get yourself something to drink or a little snack and sit for a bit because we have 15 books, 16 books. I think we have 16 books to talk about. A lot of them are ebooks, so I won't be holding up as many for you, but I did do a lot of ebook reading. Probably at least half of that was ebook. I had a couple audiobook mix and match sort of things. So yeah, that's all of that. So let's go ahead and start. So for the month of January, I read 10 things. I'm going to go in order of the books that I read. And like I said, some of them I have physically, others were audiobook, others were ebook. I mixed media'd a couple. So yeah, the first books that I read, and I'm going to hold them both up because they are a complete series, and that is Daughter of the Pirate King and Daughter of the Siren Queen by Tricia Levenseller. So these, I was surprised at how much I liked these. I expected them to be juvenile, and I don't really know why I expected them to be juvenile, but I did, and I was pleasantly surprised. They were very YA, but not in like a negative way, if that makes sense. There was definitely a little bit of like, kind of like a mutual pining sort of situation between the main character and the love interest, but also enemies to lovers. And I felt like that was done well. The first book, there's not a lot that happens plot-wise in this one. And the main character, I didn't have like big beef with her. I thought she was pretty cool, but sometimes she was just a little bit much. And the love interest, he was fine. I didn't really have any issues to speak of with him. They just both needed to admit to each other how they felt a lot sooner than they did because it was so obvious to anybody who was reading it that it was definitely a thing. But the plot was, I think, the weakest point of this because you spend a lot of time, it's just like back and forth between the two of them. She's a prisoner and he's essentially her captor, which is no surprise. It's like immediately from the beginning of the book. That's not a spoiler that this happens. So, and how their relationship changes and the background that we learn about each of them and the traumas that they've experienced. So like there was so much good about it. And I didn't even mind that it was slower, but not a lot happened. And I couldn't give it 5 stars because of that. I ended up giving it 4 stars. So let's look real quick at Compile. So like I said, characters were fine. The atmosphere, I felt like it was written really well because I love swashbuckling pirate stories. It gives you very much Pirates of the Caribbean vibes, which is great because I love those movies. The writing was fine. It was probably like a 7 on my Compile rating. Like it wasn't the best ever, but it also wasn't bad. The plot, like I said, was the slowest part of it, but it still wasn't horrible. I was intrigued. I did finish the book, I want to say, in like 48 hours maybe. It didn't take me long to finish it. And then everything, like logic of what people were doing and why made sense. And I just enjoyed it overall. Like I enjoyed it a lot. So it ended up getting a 4 from me. The second one, though, I felt was better. The plot was a lot more interesting. There was a lot more stakes, higher stakes, I should say. And the atmosphere was better. Really everything was better. You got more characters, you learned more about the characters we had in the first book, and the ones that were introduced I felt were interesting and unique on their own. Like, people didn't really blend together like can happen sometimes with the side cast of characters. The story was equally intriguing to me. It logicked just fine, and yeah, like, it was great. I gave it 5 stars. So between the two of them, I'm sure somebody could give this 5 stars and not be wrong about that. But when I hold this one up against this one, I couldn't give this one a 5 and this one a 5, because this is just demonstrably better to me. But as a series, really good. And I didn't realize how much I was going to like duologies. I really am enjoying the duology, because sometimes a series of 3 books or more can seem really daunting. And this doesn't, because there's only 2. So, Daughter of the Pirate Queen, 4 stars. Daughter of the Siren Queen, King? Wait, I got that mixed up. Daughter of the Pirate King, 4 stars. Daughter of the Siren Queen, 5 stars. Okay, we good? Cool. The next book is one that I was highly anticipating and was pretty much let down by. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever read, but there were some issues for sure with it, and that is A History of Wild Places by Shay Earnshaw. So, Shay Earnshaw, to me, is just an okay writer. I read The Wicked Deep last year or the year before, probably 2 years ago. I don't know when it came out, but I read that one first, and it was fine. It was enjoyable, but it wasn't great. I have Winterwood. Yes, I have Winterwood. Have not read it. I actually tried to sell it and nobody bought it, so if that tells anybody anything, maybe it was just kind of lackluster at best as well. I honestly probably won't read it because I've read this one and I've heard this is her best work. So if that one is going to be worse, then it would just be a waste of my time. I ended up giving this one 3 stars, and I feel a little bit bad about that, but not really, and let me explain why. So this started out with one of the most promising protagonists in terms of like my interest in that protagonist. He has a magical ability, almost like a psychic ability, to touch an object that belonged to somebody else and see where they were. Like, he can, even if they didn't necessarily have that item, he can see like their last moments or like fleeting images of where they may be or whatever. So that's pretty awesome. I'm like, okay, this sounds good. You're not with that character more than maybe like the first 5th of the book. Like, I don't even know if it's that much. Like, this is not a very long book, and I don't know when you stop being in his point of view. Okay, I think it's 39 pages. So I think right here is when you stop being in his point of view. And he's not until like, yeah, the rest of the book, he's not in there. And it's very frustrating because he was super good. The other characters were so-so. The overall plot, you have your main character who goes in search of this woman, I think Maggie St. Clair is her name, and she is a children's book writer, and she's gone missing. And so he goes to her parents, gets an item, and figures out where she was before she disappeared. And so he goes there trying to find her and ends up finding a reclusive hidden community called Pastoral. And it's very much like cult-ish, and yeah, and like the premise is that they are living in essentially a commune and away from all people, but they believe that there is a danger if they leave. So the commune used to have open gates, people could come and go as they pleased. It was like a little utopian sort of society, but something happened, something changed, and they started to believe that outside of the walls of the commune, the trees were sick and they would all get an illness and spread it and kill everybody, basically. So they were warned never to leave the boundaries of the commune of Pastoral. And it was a little bit difficult to read in that respect because of like COVID and everything. I feel like this was probably written during COVID because of just that whole idea of like an illness that spreads easily and could kill you. So that was a little bit on the nosy for me just in general. I haven't been overly interested in reading like pandemic or illness books, but it was done in such a way that it was different enough. Everything was fine, I guess I should say. Like, I feel like this could have been a 4 or 5 star book up until the reveal at the end. So the reveal at the end, I'm not going to give it away because I don't want to give spoilers away, but it was so lackluster compared to just the rest of it. I don't know how to say without spoiling anything, but suffice it to say that this is obviously almost like a magical realism sort of story, just based upon what you know about the first character that comes into it and everything, and like this, the trees having a sickness. Like, it's clearly kind of a magical realism story, but what the overall like climactic reveal is just undermines that entirely to me, and takes away the punch of some of the things that happen. And it also is just unrealistic. And some of the other things that people didn't realize or believed, it was just like, how could you possibly believe this? I feel like I'm just babbling at this point, but I gave this 3 stars. It was meh. I finished it because I was curious enough to finish it, but I honestly probably could have put it down at any point and not been mad about it. The next book that I read, which was one of the best that I read this month, that was Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. So I read this in January as well. I ended up giving this one 5 stars. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed this. I feel like the character of Amari was just so gorgeous. I loved everything about her. I loved her backstory and the problems and issues that she had internalized, not because they're good or anything, but like they're realistically written, and they show what it's actually like to be a young Black girl in a community where she's the minority, both in like our real world, where she goes to a more prestigious high school that's predominantly white, and then when she is in the magical world and is at this school where she has an ability that is generally frowned upon by everybody else. So she's an outcast in both places for similar but different reasons, and it just really hit my heart because it's just not fair for any child to have to experience that. But she finds her own power. She shows that like nobody can hold you down, nobody can keep you back. You can survive and thrive and overcome anything. And I just really loved those themes. And understanding too that what other people think of you or expect of you is not what you have to become. You don't have to live up to those expectations. You can set your own course. And I just absolutely adored all of that. And it had such a hopeful tone, even though there was a lot of like scary, magical, deadly stuff happening. The side characters in this were great. I felt like the plot was well done. It didn't feel all over the place to me. It wasn't as, I guess, tightly woven as maybe I would have liked, but that didn't detract from my overall rating of it at all. I was interested from beginning to end. The logic of everything made a lot of sense to me. I felt like the writing was great. The atmosphere, perfect. The world that Alston built in this was amazing. I loved all his little quirky little details that painted the picture of the people and the world and the culture and the hierarchy and everything. I just felt like it was done really, really well. It gave me a lot of Nevermore vibes, but like in the best way possible. And I know I've not read a ton of middle grade fantasy. There could be a lot of repeating tropes in this that have happened in other books, but like, I don't care. I don't have a problem with tropes. I like to see how different authors tackle those and how they do them differently, or even if they don't do them differently, do they succeed with them? And I feel like this book was successful, and I'm anxiously awaiting the second one, which I think comes out in a couple months. I'm not really sure, but I know it comes out this year. So very excited to read that one. Highly recommend this one. 5 out of 5 stars. Definitely pick this up if you have not yet. The hype is real. People are not kidding when they tell you how good this one is. So the next few, like the next 5, are things that I read either ebook or audiobook, so I will put their book covers up over here. So this one, Garlic and the Vampire, is by Bree Paulson. It is a graphic novel about an anxious little bulb of garlic who has to go and try to get the vampire that is lurking outside of their village, get him to leave, because she's garlic and everybody thinks that she'd be the best for the job because vampires are supposed to not like garlic. And she's terrified of this. There's a celery stalk that's kind of an asshole, which is a sentence I never thought I would say, but it is so cute. Her friend is a carrot, and he is the most supportive guy ever. He's just a perfect little cinnamon roll. I feel like I identify with this bulb of garlic on like my basest human level, because I too am an anxious bulb of garlic, and I felt like the rep anxiety rep in this was spot on. I loved the unexpected twist at the end, which I won't give away. And I hope that there's going to be more in this series. I don't really know. I wasn't able to figure out for sure if that was something that was coming or not. But it was such a cute book. The art in it was gorgeous. It was short, and it just told a really heartfelt, warm story that I absolutely adored. And I definitely recommend it. The next one is On the Horizon by Lois Lowry. And this is kind of a memoir written in verse. Lois Lowry is the author of The Giver, and she was alive during World War II. She was a child during that time. I believe that she lived in Hawaii. So the bombing of Pearl Harbor, she actually, I believe, lived there during that time. And then she visited Hiroshima after the bomb went off there. So she had first visual hand experience of both of these places when she was a child. And this memoir is about that time, and about that experience through her eyes. And it's, again, very short. It's good to listen to it on audiobook because she reads it herself. And I always prefer, even if the author has a weird voice, I still prefer to listen to their work if I can when they read it. It was really interesting because, like, World War II stuff is usually really super hard hitting because of, like, the intense descriptions and the horror of what happened. And while there is horror in this memoir, it's through the eyes of a child. And so you see what's happening through her eyes at the time. And it's really powerful because kids don't really understand what's going on. And she talks about the people that died and gives them names and talks about who they were and all of that. And I just was really happy to have had the experience of reading that because it hit me in my heart, and it just, I don't know, I really enjoyed it. So On the Horizon by Lois Lowry, get the audiobook. It was a 5 out of 5 stars for me because, one, it deserved it, but also, two, I generally will not rate anything that's a memoir below 5 stars because it's somebody's personal experience, and how can I say that it wasn't? I just don't feel like I can rate it lower, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if other people do that, but that's just my general policy and outlook on rating memoirs of any kind. So the next book that I read is another graphic novel, and it is Heartstopper Volume 1. Heartstopper, oh my gosh, it's so good. So I cannot tell you how much I love Nick and Charlie. They are two perfect little cinnamon rolls, and they just warm my heart. I've read the entire series at this point, but I did only read the first one in the month of January, and easy 5 out of 5 stars. I really like the art, even though it's simple and like two-tone color, like it isn't super graphically advanced or full of color or any of that. Like, she draws it herself and she tells the story herself, and it's just a beautiful story about an anxious gay boy who was bullied, and you know, it's gotten better for him, but then he meets this jock guy who becomes, you know, easy friends with him, and he develops feelings for this boy, but this boy believes that he's straight himself. So Nick is the one that is the jock boy who up until now feels that he is a straight boy, and Charlie is the perfect little cinnamon roll gay boy who has been through some stuff and who has a lot of anxiety. And the two of them come together, and just really, their romance to me is so believable. And you know, Nick has to kind of grapple with his sexuality and his confusion about how he feels for Charlie and about what he's always done and how he's always felt. And it's just really well done. And I think that it is a perfectly gorgeous little story. And it's relatively PG. So if anyone is uncomfortable with like explicit sex, it has not happened yet in the 4 that I have seen. So there's that. If you want that, you're not going to get it from the series. They're also teenagers, and I think that would be weird to depict explicit sex in a graphic novel with teenagers, personally. So hopefully it isn't done that way if that does happen. But overall, I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 5 stars. Like, there was nothing about it that I would say was bad. It loses a little bit, I would say, in the atmosphere department just because it is less artistically advanced than other things. So it's a lot of them and not a lot of like their surroundings. Like, you see some of their school, you see some of like their houses, but it's just not, it's a lot of their faces and them together. So like atmospherically there isn't a lot, but that didn't, again, take away from my enjoyment of it. It's a character driven story more than a plot driven story. So after Heartstopper, I read Where the Drowned Girls Go by Shauna McGuire. I actually listened to this on audiobook as well. So that one and On the Horizon, I think, were my 2 audiobooks this year. I have read all of Shauna McGuire's Wayward Children series, and I have enjoyed them all, some more than others, but I would say on the whole I've enjoyed the entire series. This one was definitely different than the others because it does not take place for long at Eleanor West's home for wayward children. It ends up happening at a different school. I think it's called Whitethorn Hall or something like that. And that's basically the antithesis of Eleanor's Home for Wayward Children. It is where Eleanor's Home for Wayward Children gathers these children who visited other worlds as a safe place essentially for them to yearn for those worlds and to survive until maybe they're able to go back and to not treat them as though what they experienced wasn't real. Whitethorn Hall wants them to forget and acclimatize back into our world and forget that this other world that they visited existed, and even tell themselves that it wasn't real. So it's definitely different. Our main character has a specific reason for why she wants to go to this other school, and it's based upon events from previous books, so I don't want to give too much away there. But it was kind of hard to read from her perspective because she was struggling so much. There's talk of suicide, so definitely trigger warning for that. Go into it just knowing that that's discussed a couple of times. And you do see some characters from previous books that make an appearance, and it was not my favorite. I liked it better than Across the Green Grass Fields, but I did not think it was my favorite of the series, but it definitely was good. I think I gave it 4 stars. Let me go see. What did I do for you? Yeah, I ended up giving it 4 stars. I mean, it got 8s across the board for me in all of the call pile categories because, like, it was good, but it wasn't the best. So definitely one to check out. If you've read all the others in the series, keep going because it's still very enjoyable, and I like seeing how the threads kind of knit everything together. The next one is another graphic novel that I read, and that is Anyas Ghost by Vera Broskol. I believe so. It's a Russian name, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, but that is a graphic novel that I read via ebook, and I wanted to like this more than I ended up liking it. So it starts out promising, I think, but there's a lot of stuff that is discussed in it that is almost normalized as okay when it's really not. So our main character is a Russian girl who is trying to fit in, and I'm fairly certain that she's an immigrant. I don't think she was born in America. I think that she was brought here as a young child and was picked on a lot and was chubbier when she was younger, so there's fat shaming. And so she fits herself into what she thinks makes her look the most American and makes her fit in the best, which I don't like that as like something that's overly focused on, and it's really not addressed at all. I don't think it's really addressed at all. And then she has a friend. It's been a little bit since I've read. I can't remember the friend's name, but he, and I say friend because like she's not very nice to him because he will not give up the Russian culture that surrounds him. Like he doesn't try to fit in. He doesn't try to mask how intelligent he is or fix his accent or any of those things that she feels like she needed to do. And so she distances herself from him because he is just like a ball and chain of Russia around her neck that she doesn't want to be associated with because she wants to be popular. She also likes this guy who has a girlfriend and just doesn't seem to care that he has a girlfriend. Her friend that is American is like an asshole and a smoker, and not that you're wrong, there's nothing moral about being a smoker or not, but smoking is not healthy, and there's nothing really like gone into about that, how unhealthy that is. It's just like this is what they did. She ends up falling down a well, and at the bottom of the well there's a skeleton, and it was totally an accident. Like she can't get out and ends up meeting the skeleton's ghost, which is connected to the bones. So this skeleton of a young girl has been down here forever. And the story that she tells, the main character, is that she was killed, she was pushed down there, and broke her neck and died down there. Pretty graphic. Also, I thought this was like, I don't know, for younger audiences, but some of the themes in here are really kind of graphic. I think somebody is walking by and hears her, like the main character, calling out, and ends up getting her out. And she like leaves the ghost behind, and it's like a sad moment. But then when she gets out of there and goes home, the ghost is with her because somehow she managed to accidentally put a tiny little bone, like a finger bone of the ghost, like it got mixed up in her stuff as she's like shuffling around trying to get out. And so she takes one of the bones with her, and so the ghost is able to come with her. And hijinks kind of ensue from there. The ghost is one of those characters that you're not sure how to feel about the whole time, and she sort of changes over the course of the story, and not in the best way. And again, I don't want to give too many spoilers, but some of the things revolving around the ghost to me are pretty fucked up. And again, not really addressed. And there's a scene with a boy that is really fucked up too, and not addressed either. So I don't know who to recommend it to, I guess. I wouldn't say don't read it, because I was intrigued by the story. I finished it really quick, but also I was like raising my eyebrow and side-eyeing a lot of the decisions that the author made. Like, have all of that not great shit in it, but like address it. Don't have it in there and then not ever talk about it and then it's like it's fine. It made me uncomfortable. So I ended up only giving this one 3 stars as well. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it, but I mean, it was fine, I guess. But those things definitely detracted from my enjoyment of it as well. And I didn't like the characters as a whole. I think the best thing about it was the atmosphere and the writing, but everything else was just so-so. So, was that the last? No, there's one more from January. So, the second book that I read in January was The Girl in the Tower by Catherine Arden. And this was excellent as I remember it being. I actually enjoyed it much more the second time because I understood the story better. I followed the pace of everything a lot better than I did the first time. I just love Vasya. I love Morozko. I love the folklore, the atmosphere. This is my favorite book that I read in January, because it's just excellent. I don't understand how anyone could not like this series. I know that the pace of the first one is a bit slower, but this one isn't. It's pretty quick. And the plot is really good. And like the purpose of some of the decisions and the things that happen, everything makes sense. There's nothing about this that is bad, in my opinion. I give it obviously 5 stars, 10s across the board in Caw Pile. The atmosphere, like I said, is just so perfectly written. The setting, you can envision everything. You can feel the cold off the pages of the Russian winter. The magic system, the folklore, the Chatty, like everything in it is so good. The characters are just amazing. The writing is beautiful, lyrical. The plot is tight. It's intriguing. Everything, like I said, is logical, and I just enjoyed it to the fullest extent. I think I read it in just a couple days towards the end of the month to finish it for our winter night read along. That kind of fell to the wayside in February, I'll admit. I finished the last book of this in February, which I'll discuss here shortly, but the read along itself and the live show and everything, like, my life just spiraled out of control. So that didn't end up happening. So if you were watching and participating in that, I deeply apologize to you, but both Emma and I had a lot going on. I know she's had a lot of school stuff. I had just a lot of stuff I don't want to go into going on, so we didn't end up finishing the February stuff, but we'll get to that in a second. I did finish this in January like I was supposed to. We had our live show. It was great. It's just so good. I'll shut up about it now, though. So those are all of the books that I read in January. So that was 10 things, I think. I have 6 things that I read in February. So even though it was a shitty month, I still managed to read a few things. One of them I'm going to probably talk at length about, so real sorry for that, but it has to be done. But we'll get to that in a minute. So very quickly, I read Heartstopper Volume 2, Heartstopper Volume 3, and Heartstopper Volume 4 in like 3 days. Like I read one, and like, yeah, I read one a day for like 3 days at the beginning of the month, because I just finally got all my library loans. I was getting the graphic novels from the library, And yeah, was super happy to have those. They all got 5 stars for me, but there were different things that I liked and disliked about them. The second one, I think that one takes place in Paris, but you just don't have a lot of the atmosphere still, which bothered me. Like, I love knowing about Nick and Charlie. I love their story, but I did want a little bit more because it was a very similar story to the first one. A lot of romantic interactions and kissing and like talking about how much they care about each other and exploring Nick's identity and whether they should come out with how they feel and all that, which is all very important and I loved, but I just wanted more atmosphere. And it just wasn't as much. It was still fine, like it was still good. I gave it an 8, but it could have been better. The writing again was good, but it could have been a little bit better. It was not as good as the first book, but it was still good. And then everything else was fine. Volume 3, I liked. I thought it was great as well. And then volume 4, that one read a little less like a graphic novel and a little bit more like a cautionary tale against an eating disorder, which again, important. Not going to take off for that, but it was more of a telling you things versus showing you things, which I feel is like really, that's a talent. If you have a graphic novel that is visual and it feels like you're telling me more than showing me. But again, the content was important, so I didn't take anything off for that. So all 4 of the Heartstopper volumes that I read this year, all of them got 5 stars. So let's get to the one I'm so excited to talk about from February. So as everybody knows, unless you live under a rock, Sarah Janet Maas has released the second book in her Crescent City series, House of Sky and Breath. I decided to read House of Earth and Blood. So I started House of Earth and Blood on January 30th. I did not finish it until February 21st. I read it for 23 days. I inhaled the ACOTAR series. I think I read all of the books in that series in 23 days. This book was the worst thing of hers that I've ever read. Again, even still, even though I really just disliked the entire experience, I still gave it 3 stars because of a couple of things. So first, the characters. They felt like fan fiction of Feyre and Rhysand, whatever, however you say his name. That felt like fan fiction to me, because they felt like the same characters. Yes, there were differences. Hunt, I felt, was a carbon copy of Rhysand. He wasn't as interesting, like he was a little bit more of a wet blanket than Rhysand was, but just his backstory, his tortured past, the slavery thing, it all felt like I was reading Rhysand's backstory again. Bryce is similar, I think, to Feyre and whatnot, but she is far more annoying. I did not like her really at all, because I just felt like she was unnecessarily a bitch. Even though what happened to her, like, I understand she's grieving, she is dealing with PTSD, she has quite a few issues that she's sorting through for the majority of the book, but your trauma does not give you the right to be an asshole to somebody else. It does not excuse that behavior. It does not give you a free pass. And she was just a bitch to everybody for no reason, in my opinion. But this is coming from somebody who has dealt with a lot of trauma and who has had therapy for my trauma to fix me. Bryce never goes to therapy. She never deals with any of it. So it makes sense that she is the way she is. And I'm not saying that it doesn't. I can't handle reading that because it frustrates me. The atmosphere would have been a much higher score than it was if I didn't feel like the world was just kind of a jumbled mess. So if you have read this book, or if you haven't, the story is about our main character, Bryce Quinlan, who is a half fae, half human girl living in a city called Lunathion, I believe. They call it Crescent City as a nickname. And she lives with her best friend, Danica Fender, who is a werewolf or a wolf shifter. I think it's more of a wolf shifter. And she and her are best friends. They do everything together. They're party girls. They go and do all kinds of drugs. They have all kinds of sex. It's very edgy. And then you spend like 5 chapters, which is a lot of pages, following that shit show, and then something big happens and it plunges Bryce into like a spiral to rock bottom, essentially. And then the next like 500 pages, she's trying to solve a mystery because it involves her. So it says in the synopsis, a demon murders her closest friends. So it's not giving anything away to say that a demon murders her closest friends around chapter 5, and then she spirals down into depression. They think that they've arrested the guy. Ends up that he is not the one doing it because the killings start up again. And so the government of the city comes to her and says, this is the same type of killing that happened to your friends, and we're hoping that maybe you can help in the investigation because of that reason. That to me, like, she's not a cop, she's not anything like that, so I don't really understand why she would be chosen to solve a murder. If that logic doesn't logic for me, but that's what happens. And she ends up getting paired up with Hunt, who, like I said, is the copy of Rhysand. He is like the angel of death in this book. He does, like, basically mets out the governor's justice, kills people, all that stuff to try to buy his freedom back. So he's notorious, and he ends up being her guard. And so it is their story, and this, like, they don't like each other. It's not really enemies to lovers because they didn't hate each other before, but she does not want to work with him, he does not want to work with her, and it's like they don't have a choice, and so they have to figure out a way to make it work. And this book is 800 pages long, and I can tell you with the utmost confidence, and I will say it with my whole chest, at least 300 pages of this could have been cut. There is too much. There's no reason for it to be as long as it is. It drags and drags and drags and drags and drags and drags. And not even Sarah's like character banter, because I think she writes decent characters and I think their chemistry works. It was not enough to get me through. Like I said, this book is 800 pages. I was not fully invested to the point where I couldn't put this book down until 600 pages. I have never, ever experienced that from anything else I've ever read. So I ended up actually getting spoiled for the end of book 2. I had pre-ordered it. I was honestly considering canceling my pre-order, but I was like, well, maybe House of Earth and Blood will get better. Maybe, it'll finally pull me in and I'll be ravenous for book 2. So I ended up getting that book. I also ended up like flipping to the last page to see how many pages it was. Didn't cover the text and spoiled the big reveal for myself, which is fine because that reveal is the only reason that I continued with this book and the only reason that I will continue reading. The second one is because I need to know how we get there. If you finished it, you know what I'm talking about. Y'all, it was a struggle. 23 days. 23 days. And that was just getting through the first 600 pages, really, because I finished it, once I got to 600 pages, I finished those last 200 in like 2 days. I wouldn't recommend this book to anybody. Like, I would not recommend this book to anybody, even though the ending was really good. I felt like it was well done, except for like the one page, everything is cool, and then flip the page and everything is not, at like the big reveal. That pissed me off because I felt like it was terribly done, and all of like these things happened during this time that she didn't know about, didn't make sense with the timeline, because like her and this other person, there's just no way she wouldn't notice all of these things at all. So that was an issue, and I can go into more detail about that. Actually, I'm gonna put spoilers right here because I need to talk about it, or else I'm gonna go crazy. So skip ahead if you don't want to hear this part. But so something happens and Hunt gets his wings cut off, which again feels like Rhysand. That was just like too close for me to that. He gets his wings cut off. He is like mortally wounded. Like, obviously he's not dead or anything, because like that's the point. You have to have the living death or whatever it's called. But he is very, very wounded and hardly capable of moving. And he gets patched up. She brings him home, and like, I don't know if it's that night or the next night. I'm not really sure. Like, his wings just got fucking cut off. And then they're getting like hot and heavy on the couch, and he's got a fucking open back wound basically. And she's like grinding on him, and he ends up like opening it up. She has to call and like in a lot of pain. She has to call the like med witches or whatever to come and heal him and whatever they can, and he gets put to bed. And while he's in bed, she leaves. I think she wants to go back to her old apartment where her and Danica lived to try to see if they missed anything in the apartment that could be evidence. And on her way there, the apartment ends up being on fire, so it's clear that somebody wants her to not go there. So then I think she ends up either getting a text or a call or something from this mermaid friend of theirs who lives in the waters next to the town because there's some kind of drug deal going on and it's relevant to the story. So she goes with him and gets there, and the person that's there that beat her there is fucking Hunt, who is doing the drug deal because he wants this drug that makes them very powerful so that he can do a rebellion once again, even though that's what got him to be a slave. Which, you know, I get it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that like plot point, but he was fucking basically incapacitated. He was in so much pain. How the fuck did he get from there to the docks with no wings? He couldn't fly. How did he get there in that time? Because it's not that long of a span of time. And then all this reveal about how this has been going on, like he's been planning this for weeks. He knew the answer to this mystery before she did, and he's known for days, and his demeanor was no different. You're in his head just like you're in her head. There's no hint that he knows any of that stuff. And, you know, he's supposed to be communicating with all these people via text or whatever. She's on his phone constantly. So it just was terribly done. Terribly done. Like, period. Terribly done. And it was literally one page to the next page, it felt like. Within like 3 pages max, he was all the way up here and he dropped all the way down here. And she fucking loves to do that to her male characters. And it drives me nuts because it just does. And while it makes sense more for Hunt than it did for Tamlin, while it makes more sense for Hunt, and like as the story progresses, that decision making makes a lot more sense. It's relevant to the story. It has an impact. The execution was fucking terrible. It was fucking terrible. Like I can't with it. So yeah, that was the thing. I almost stopped reading there because I'm like, really? Everybody cries at the end of this book because of everything, and the only thing I cried about was a side character death. That hit me really hard. That was not even the main characters. I was not that concerned about the main characters, which, I mean, obviously I shouldn't be because there's a second book with both of them in it, but like, I still usually, even though I know a sequel's coming and they're gonna be okay, I still usually get emotional when characters I love are in like compromising life and death situations. I didn't give a shit. I just wanted to be done. So yeah, it got 3 stars. And I honestly feel like that was generous. It probably should have been a 2-star, but I gave it 3 because I still fucking finished it. There were parts of it that I enjoyed, and I'm gonna move on with the series. But yeah, I'm sorry if I have any SJM stans that watch my videos, but this shit, not it at all. It was definitely like the worst of her stuff I've ever read. I haven't read Throne of Glass yet, but I just know that's going to be better. I just know it is. This felt like a cash grab. It felt like something that she was told to do by publishers. It was very much, to me, like she wrote fan fiction of her own previous work, and I just overall was unimpressed. There was a tweet going around about how she just continues to rocket upward on her mediocrity, and that is so fucking true. So true. And literally the only reason that I am continuing this shit is because of what happens at the end of book 2, because I need to know how we get there, and that's it. That's the only reason. So I'll stop bitching about that, but I had to get that out. So yes, 3 stars, probably should have been 2. I was generous and gave it 3. Yeah. Anyway, at some point, and I don't remember, I think this is actually, yeah, this was supposed to be February's book. I started it and did not finish it, and that is Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. I started this on audiobook at the same time that I started Crescent City, and honestly, Crescent City is one of the main reasons why my last month was shit, because it almost put me in a reading slump. I didn't want to ever read it, but I knew I had to read it, and so I would just sit there and stare at it and then not do anything else. And this is one of those things that I was doing that I just couldn't make myself do because I knew I had to get through that behemoth of a book. So this one is potentially a carryover into March. I haven't decided yet. It really will just depend on the draws that I have, but I am starting my internship with school, so that is going to put a damper on how much free time I have. So we'll see what I'm able to get done in March and if that can go with it. The next book that I read in February was The Winter of the Witch by Catherine Arden, and I was shut this book. Granted, this was 400 pages. Crescent City was 800 pages. Took me 23 days to read 800 pages of that. Took me 2 days to read 400 some pages of this. This book was excellent. It literally started off at a sprint and did not stop sprinting until the end. The plot, while it just barreled forward, everything made sense. Everything was so tightly woven together. The atmosphere was not sacrificed to the plot. The character development was not sacrificed to the plot. The writing absolutely was as good, if not better, than it had been at all. The intrigue, I couldn't put it down. I had to know. Everything in it made logical sense. I just enjoyed it. I wish I could give it more than 5 stars. This was the best end to a series that I have ever read, which is what I had heard it would be, and it lived up to all of my expectations and more. It was a perfect story for me. I mean, even some things that were left not totally tied up didn't bother me because you don't get answers to everything in real life. So like, there were aspects of it that maybe I would have liked to have seen more of, but it did not detract from my enjoyment of it because I didn't see more of those things. I didn't really go into what the series is about. I've talked about it before. I'm not going to talk about it again. I have other videos if you would like to know more about this series, but I highly recommend it. It's honestly probably going to be a yearly reread for me because of how much I fucking enjoyed myself. In the winter, it's the perfect time to read it, and it's just been glorious the entire time. I wept multiple times. I ended up loving characters that I hated. And that is the mark of a good author who can make a character in the book so horrible that you love hating them, and then they can redeem themselves in a way and just be so good that you love loving them. And that happened here. And I was just so impressed. I was so impressed. Please read this series. Please, if you do nothing else, read this series. And take with a grain of salt how you feel about The Bear and the Nightingale. I loved it. I know people don't. Once you get past that one, though, the other two, chef's kiss. Absolutely perfect. So I'll also stop gushing about that one. My computer went to sleep because I'm babbling. Okay. The next and final book that I read in the month of February was actually the January Fairy Loot edition of Only a Monster by Vanessa Lynn. So I actually surprisingly really enjoyed this. I did not know how I would feel about it, but I really liked it. I gave it 4 stars because there were some things that I didn't love, but they were not big enough for it to be like a bad review at all. The characters, I really liked them except for the main character. To me, she was annoying. She was selfish. She had her own ideas about things, and she made decisions at the expenses of others, which I get really annoyed with. Like, it's okay to do that a couple times, but she did that throughout the entire book. She's also, the premise of this is that the main character has no idea that she's a monster, that she comes from a family of monsters, and the family has a specific, well, all monsters, I should say, have an ability that they share. And then there are multiple families within the monster community that all have different abilities. So the main character does not know about any of that, and it jumps right into the plot. Like, immediately she accidentally does something she didn't know she had the power to do, and then all hell breaks loose, basically. And so that, in terms of her character, she knows nothing about this world whatsoever. She wasn't raised in it. Nobody gave her any information about it, but she thinks she knows better than everybody else who lives in this world. She thinks she knows better about the politics. She thinks she knows better about the culture. She thinks she knows better about, you know, what will happen to you if you do certain things. She just believes that she's invincible and can do whatever, which just drives me fucking crazy the entire time. There is definitely a love triangle blossoming in here. and I have no idea who the end result love will be. I like the love triangle, but I don't believe it, if that makes sense. I've never had a problem with love triangle. I think they're very YA, and they're one of my favorite YA tropes, honestly, because you can love multiple people at once. But I think that Joan is such an annoying character that it is unbelievable to me that both of these guys would like her. One of them more so than the other, because there's context and backstory with one of them that makes it make sense. But the other one, why do you like her? She doesn't listen to you ever, and she's very annoying, and like it just doesn't make sense. There's no logic there. So that was difficult for me. The atmosphere was great. I will say that this author's strong suit is the atmosphere, because there at one point it takes place in the 90s, and having grown up in the 90s, like I felt like I was back there. The description of the style and the technology was really great. She is good at using the five senses with her description of the setting and the atmosphere and what they're feeling and thinking and smelling and tasting and all of that. And the descriptions I felt were done really, really well. The writing was so-so. The dialogue was, I felt choppy. It felt like characters were talking all over each other. The plot was fine. I gave it an 8 in call pile. It could have been better, but it just kept going straight from beginning to end. I didn't really understand why certain things happened and what the overall point of certain things were, but I still felt like on the whole it was good. I was intrigued. I finished it in just like 2 days, 3 days maybe. The logic, again, some of the logic with the characters didn't make sense. Some of the logic with the world didn't make sense, which that doesn't mean that there isn't logic there, but this author doesn't like hold your hand and like spoon feed you all of the things. She doesn't info dump. She gives you the information as it's appropriate based upon what's happening in the story, which is very good, and a lot of like seasoned authors don't do. Sarah Janet, she does an info dump, which I just, after reading Crescent City, I was like, thank fucking God, everything I've read since then, people know how to pace and they know how to not throw 1,000 things at you and confuse you. And then the enjoyment. I mean, I enjoyed it. Again, I gave it an 8 for enjoyment and claw pile. So 4 out of 5, I think, is a pretty good rating for a debut author. The magic system, though, in this, guys, is the reason to read it, because while I can't say for sure if it has been done before, because I'm just not as widely read as some of y'all are, I've never seen it, and I felt like we have dealt with similar magic systems, but this one has a special twist that I have just never read, and it was done very, very well, and I very much enjoyed it, and it explains why the main character and her people are considered monsters. It makes perfect sense. So you have all these morally great characters who can do this ability that is not really good, but also has positive outcomes, and they have to grapple with that. The main character struggles to grapple with that, and I think that struggle is realistic for sure. So 4 out of 5 stars for Only a Monster. Look at this edition, guys. Look how pretty. This will probably show up. I'm gonna do a book haul at some point. And now that I am subscribed to Loom Crate and Fairy Loot, you'll see several books in that are from this. But look at this art, y'all. Like, isn't that gorgeous? I can't get over it. So, yeah. Okay, so those are all of the books that I read in January and February. So again, I apologize. This is a very long video, but I just felt like it was best just to knock it out and be done with it. So if you have watched this far, I would say to let's go ahead and put the crescent moon emoji in the comment section for good old Crescent City if you have reached the end of this video. Again, I just want to thank you guys so much for being here still when I take my random little hiatuses that I take, and for watching my lengthy videos when I have to play catch up. It means so much to me that I have y'all here. So thank you 1,000 times, and I will definitely be seeing you guys in the next one. Have a great one. Bye.